It's been a couple of months now, and I've actually watched the Mario movie a couple of times. I have it on Prime Video, so I put it on sometimes and watch it. And more and more, I start to realize just how good this movie is, how enjoyable it is, how endlessly quotable it is, how amusing it actually is. The fun little cameos, like Glass Joe is in the movie. You can see him in the a picture of him in the Punch Out Punch Pizzeria. You can see all the love and care that went into this movie, right? And I appreciate it more, I think, now than what I did when I first saw it. Because I think when I first saw it, I was kind of nitpicking like some of the characterization and some of the decisions they made. But as I've watched this over and over again, I really began to appreciate just how much it deviates from the source material, how much it's its own thing, and how much as a hardcore fan, would probably have been like a lot more rigid with how I depicted the characters. Like I would probably depict Peach as being like a lot more effeminate and not like as much of an action girl, because like that's not really what people who play the games expect. But the movie wanted to make her more proactive, and good for them, right? They did a fairly good job with what they wanted to do with that. I'm not unhappy with that at all. Quite the contrary. I find myself enjoying Peach more and more as I watch this movie, especially since I've noticed, going back on repeat viewings, I really need to call this out more, that the narrative that like Angry Joe tried coming up with, like, oh, she got it right on her first try. That's not what she said, all right? Like, it's such a weird. There are things you can talk about this movie, but all in all, it's overall like a very good, enjoyable film, right? There is nothing wrong with it, and it really delivers on the source material. So, what's the problem, right? The problem is that inexplicably, one of the most successful video game adaptations ever made, this billion-dollar movie, right? This thing comes out and somehow, some way, for some reason, all of these articles about how every video game adaptation ever is the best, right? From Castlevania to Sonic the Hedgehog to The Last of Us, like those articles that were being thrown at every single property in existence, Cyberpunk Edge Runners, like so many other things, right? Like it felt like for a while, for the past couple of years, actually, it felt like every single new video game adaptation was like the best ever, right? And now that the Mario movie has come out, eclipsed all of them in success and popularity, especially The Last of Us HBO. Where is the discussion about this? Like, are we seriously going to just let this slide? Like, are we going to allow game journalists not to acknowledge that the Mario movie might be the best video game adaptation ever made? Now, I'm not saying it is, by the way, because I don't think it is, but are we not going to let the discussion be had? Are we not going to like seriously like argue whether or not the Mario movie is better than Last of Us? Because I can assure you it is. Not only is not the Mario brand like infinitely more successful than The Last of Us, like the adaptation is better, right? They do more creative things with the property. It's not just a rehash of what we saw in the game with like weird deviations, right? Like, the Mario movie, the changes it makes perfect sense. It's acceptable. It's fun. It's engaging. It's well paced. It's exciting. It has great animation. Like The Last of Us is just the same boring zombie movie, this time in like a TV show format. It's like, what? Come on, bro. It's embarrassing. So like my problem is like where are the people who believe that this is the best video game adaptation ever made? Like why is there not more serious discussion about this? Like, why are we not talking about the possibility that the Mario Bros. Movie is the best adaptation? Like, where is the talk about this? Why is nobody bringing this up at all? And it really does come off to me, now that I've seen this happen in real time, that the reason why so many video game adaptations were like hyped up as the best ever, Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Cyberpunk Edge Runners, the Last of Us, Castlevania, like so many of them were hyped up as the best ever. The reason for that was to try and find something they could weaponize against the Mario movie. It was something they could point to and say that like, oh, that's a real video game adaptation. Not that Mario Bros shit. Like watch Castlevania. That's a good representation of what the games are like, right? That was what they were trying to do, I think. But the Mario movie has eclipsed essentially all of them without even really trying. So many people were trying to say the Sonic movie was better, but when you look at the box office numbers, when you look at like the hype, now that Mario is on home video, now that you've like can actually compare the two, like I think it's not even close. Like the Sonic movie did not even come any, did not even come close to the success of the Mario one. And I don't know, like so many people were like seriously trying to push the narrative that like Sonic was better, and they weren't Sonic fanboys. Like I wouldn't call Angry Joe a Sonic fanboy. Like people like Angry Joe were seriously trying to push a narrative that the Mario movie was not good. And that now they're trying to downplay this as one of the most popular, successful movies of the year and one of the best video game adaptations ever made. And we, the audience, cannot allow this to happen. It's not enough to simply like push back against critic review scores and how they try to downplay this movie, critically speaking. Like we really need to talk about like why they're not covering this success story, why they're not covering the possibility of the expansion into Donkey Kong Country or The Legend of Zelda or more forays into Pokemon, which are all like going to be very very successful in and of themselves. And like they could branch out into more niche stuff. They could put out Pikmin. And what is that going to do for the game sales? Like if they put out a Pikmin movie, like is that going to like explode the brand in popularity? Like I think it's possible. Like I don't know how likely it is, because I think Nintendo's like needs to put out like a couple of Super Mario Bros. Movies before they start branching out to like their lesser known franchises. But I think a Donkey Kong Country movie is in the cards. I think a Legend of Zelda movie is in the cards, and I think these are going to be way bigger than anybody is giving them credit for. And I think we're on like this verge of a major Nintendo like popularity surge, right? They are going to replace Marvel as like the fad of like the new decades. And well deserved, honestly. Nintendo's a way better brand than Marvel, but like why is nobody else seeing this? Why is nobody else seeing the potential? I'm reminded very strongly of how like from the 2013 to 2017 period, I knew like bone deep, right, that Nintendo was better than the competition. I knew that they would become highly successful very soon, and by 2017 my predictions panned out exactly as I foretold. They put out the Switch and they demolished the competition, and now they're like ruling the entire industry. And now they're well on their way to toppling Disney. They're well on their way to like establishing themselves as a global entertainment brand. And people are still at this stage trying to downplay their success. They're still trying desperately to do everything they possibly can to downplay Nintendo. And I think this is a very interesting way they're trying to do it. Like I think there may be a legit possibility that during Game Award season that Jeff Keighley might try and push The Last of Us as a far more as like the winner of like the best video game adaptation award. I'm actually more interested in that specific award than I am the game of the year, which is I think at this point a shoe in for Tears of the Kingdom. But like Mario versus The Last of Us, right? That seems good. That seems like it's going to be the big video game adaptation competition of the year, and The Last of Us is basically forgotten. Nobody remembers it. Nobody talks about it at all. It's been like forgotten for like what a good 3 months now. Like I haven't heard anyone talk about it at all since the last episode aired. And I good riddance. Like I am tired of seeing people like pretend to be excited about these new shows. I'm tired of seeing people pretend to be excited about these new PlayStation releases. Like I'm tired, sick and tired of it. I always have been. Um, get, once Game Award season passes, we're not going to hear about The Last of Us HBO again for a while until season 2 gets made. So like if it wins, so what? But if it loses to the Mario Bros. Movie, that is going to be a big blow against the credibility of Naughty Dog, Neil Druckmann, and The Last of Us IP, because they spent so much time hyping up this game, this adaptation as being like the best thing ever. And if it loses to the Mario Bros. Movie of all things, oof, that is going to be hard to sit through. And even if it does win, like it's going to be forgotten anyway, right? Like the Mario movie is going to have a way stronger legacy with sequels, with new games, a stronger brand. The Last of Us is just going to continue withering and dying, coasting off of its like past glory. of game journalists like prepped like propped up like propaganda. Like that's what I expect to see from The Last of Us. It is embarrassing how how bad this IP is and how few people seem to want to acknowledge it. So at this stage, what can we expect? You know, I think we are going to see critics continue to downplay Nintendo games, the Nintendo movies, right? They have to. Like it's their career, right? Their entire purpose is to like downplay like things coming from like lesser known studios in order to prop up like Disney and the corporate like studios and stuff like that. Like, Nintendo is like outside of that system to a certain extent. So I think critics are going to keep doing their thing trying to downplay every new Nintendo movie that comes out, but it's not going to impact the audience reception at all. Like I think more and more like Nintendo fans are going to like be pushing back against the critics. And I think more and more they're going to lose a lot of their credibility. Like if Angry Joe comes out every Nintendo movie and tries telling us that like, oh, Castlevania was better, Sonic was better, The Last of Us was better, like eventually people are going to start like getting upset with him. And I think like that's already started now with like some of the stuff we're seeing with like some of the backlash we saw with you know the his Mario movie review, which was ridiculous, and his lack of coverage of Tears of the Kingdom. Like people are going to start noticing the bias eventually. And he doesn't want people like I'm sure like once people realize the reason why he doesn't cover Nintendo content, it's about the money. That's going to be a big blow against his credibility, not just for when it comes to his coverage of Nintendo content, but of his YouTube channel in period. And I think more and more critics are going to struggle with this going forward. Like 10 years from now, is Yahtzee going to be relevant? Is Jim Sterling going to still be alive? Like, are any of these people going to be relevant? Like, the problem that like game critics are having now is that like all of them are older and nobody younger is going to have the same relevancy that they had, right? So we are going to legit see this issue where like the Angry Joes, the Yahtzees, the Jim Sterlings, they're going to become boomers, like angry old men yelling at clouds, while the actual audience is like coming going to see this movie and coming to these movies and then going to coming to their own conclusions, right? And more and more people are going to start tuning them out. People are not going to care what they think at all. Like Angry Joe's reviews, their views are going down. Jim Sterling, he's lost like what 200,000 subs, like probably more than that at this point. You know, Yahtzee had to like is the only thing propping up the Escapist. Like how much longer is he gonna last? The there's no possible way for Nintendo to go bankrupt at this point. People like to meme and say that Nintendo is going to go third party. It isn't going to happen, like ever. And they have again a major reason for that is that they have pretty successfully forayed into filmmaking. They have pretty successfully like expanded their brand to the point where like Mario is now a film star, right? They have their theme parks. They have like the mobile support. They have like their consoles. They have their IP. Merchandising they're getting into. Like we're getting to the point where it is going to become very impossible to downplay the success of Nintendo, like people have been doing traditionally. Like I don't expect 10 years from now that anyone will be ignoring major Nintendo releases ever again.